Welcome, my name is Britton Latulip. I am the author of the Art of Raising Children for Greatness series, and I am the president of Blue Manors Online Academy. A lot of people in the homeschooling world are hardcore creationists. They love Ken Ham. They believe in a young earth, and many people have asked me to talk about this topic, and I used to love talking about this topic. In fact, I was in apologetics in high school. I was the head of the Christian Fellowship Athletes. I forget what it is. I wasn't the head. I was like the student rep at my school, Fellowship of Christian Athletes. And I used to do these apologetic talks on evolution, and I used to watch Ken Ham, not Ken Ham, excuse me, this is before Ken Ham. I used to watch this guy, Kent Hovind. Kent Hovind is awesome. I still prefer him. I think Ken Ham is amazing with all he's built and all the research he's put together. But as far as a powerful debater, orator, Kent Hovind was the guy. I grew up watching him. It was essential to my faith. It was huge. I feel like evolution really contradicts the Christian faith, and I'm going to get into that. Even though they've tried to blur the two together, merge the two together, it really contradicts the Christian faith, and I was really challenged by that. And so I feel like Kent Hovind really kind of solidified my faith, and I became a great apologist. And I used to talk about this stuff all the time. I used to teach it in school, in churches, and then I got away from it for a while because I realized you really can't win this argument because it really does come down to faith. So today what I want to talk about is not just evolution, but the religion of science, how it started, who's promoting it, and then I want to tie it together because it's not just about evolution. It's really about taking down the Christian church, and evolution is just one of their arguments or one of their dogmas that they promoted, and it's easier in our time to see that the latest rendition of their science that they're pushing in the world, and it's easily dispelled in our time, but in 50 to 100 years, it'll be accepted as another dogma, and it'll be fit into the Christian churches as it's already being done, okay? So this is wave and wave and wave. Evolution was just one wave. So that's what we're going to talk about. I would say that the evolution, one of the major problems in the apologetics movement, and I even said with Ken Ham, is he thinks he's arguing evolution. And I think he thinks it's an honest debate. And if he can just show the arguments for evolution, against evolution, creationism, he can defeat this science or this false science. And he believes that the science matters, okay? The problem is the people who are promoting this, they weren't scientists. They were New World Order, Freemasons, Globalists, enemies of the church. And the movement made the science. They made up evolution as kind of a Genesis myth for their religion, Globalism and Freemasonry. And the whole purpose was to take God out of the equation. So when they talk about science and reason, that movement that came out of the French Revolution, it was always about removing God from the equation. Saying, okay, we're going to start thinking as human beings apart from God. We'll pretend that God doesn't exist because they don't believe he does. And we're going to start just only focusing on our own intellect, what we know, what we can prove. So they cut God out of the mix. And they believe that God is a social construct, that man created God. And it's just been passed down through tradition as a social construct. So they believe that they have to kill that belief because God only exists in our head. And the only way that they can do that is by explaining away the origin. So all that we've seen, even the Bible says, the heavens declare the glory of God. And you can look around and say, this looks designed. It looks like there's purpose, that there's meaning to this stuff. And so they said, okay, we know God isn't real. That's their belief, okay? We know God isn't real. We have to prove to the masses he's not real. We need a theory, an origin of the world that we can sell to them, that we can teach them, so that the social construct of God, we can eliminate it from their minds, and humanity can progress according to our own intellect, okay? So that's the movement. And before I get into that, I want to start with humanism. It really started humanism, and it affected the church very early. It started as humanism, and then you had the Glorious Revolution, and then it really accumulated in the French Revolution. And this is when they started saying it will have the age of reason and the Enlightenment, and we'll only look to science and reason for basically everything. And the goal was to push God out. It's very important you understand that. And it didn't start with the theory of evolution. It started, and you're going to see a bunch of things. You're going to see relativism. That's going to be a construct, that there's no absolute truth, that it's all a social construct. And it's going to continue to play out along the spectrum. But the first thing that they attacked, these humanists, these secularists, the Enlightenment, was the miracles. And you saw that with even Thomas Jefferson removing all of the miracles from the Bible. Anything that was talking about divine, any miracles, anything that was miraculous or divine, he took it out. And he had a new Bible that just had Jesus's, wise sayings and teachings like, do unto others and stuff like that. But they wanted to eliminate God even from the Bible. And they would say, a fact, like you can't prove, for example, presence in the Eucharist. So that was one of the first things that they attacked, was presence in the Eucharist. You can't prove the Holy Spirit. This is stuff we have to take as Christians on faith. We put our faith in Jesus and what he did and being raised from the dead, in those miracles that proved he was God, and then we take the rest on faith. So if God says that there's presence, and I'm not saying that there is, I know a lot of people don't believe that, in the Eucharist, they'd say, well, prove it. It's just bread. You're superstitious. Okay, and a lot of people have accepted that now. The Holy Spirit, prove that when you're baptized, you get the Holy Spirit. You can't scientifically. I mean, nothing changes. You don't get bigger. Like, I can't prove to you that I have the Holy Spirit. I take it on faith from the scriptures. So they started doing that. They started attacking the miracles and calling Jesus just a good teacher. And their argument was from science, that everything has a cause, that there's no scientific evidence for this. People can't just rise from the dead. And we would as Christians say, well, that's the whole point. People can't just rise from the dead. If it happened, it had to be divine, right? But they would say, no, it can't happen through science, and there is no God, so that just proves the Bible. It's just a myth. It's just a bunch of good stories, okay? So I want you to know that this movement first started attacking the Bible with the miracles, because from our perspective, miracles are real, and they prove the existence of God, and they prove his divine revelation, because certain prophets would come and they would work miracles, and the people say, wow, this person worked a miracle, or Jesus rose these people from the dead, or he raised himself from the dead, so it must be divine. So the men of the Enlightenment of science and reason, they first went after the miracles. Everything that was a dogma of the church, everything that we believe about the Holy Spirit, or about the Eucharist, or about divine revelation, or anything like that, or the Bible's the inspired word of God, they attacked that first. Next, they went on to evolution. They needed an origin myth for their religion to compete with Christianity, intelligent design. And so they manufactured evolution. It wasn't like a bunch of scientists went out there and started discovering these things. Like Charles Darwin went out to prove evolution. The movement went out to prove evolution. And I'm going to go through all of the ways that they did that in the beginning and how it was disproven, and it was stupidity and stupidity and stupidity and stupidity, and they just keep fixing it. It doesn't matter how many times evolution has been disproven, they just keep coming back with more and more, because they need this myth. They need the world to believe that there was a way for the world to seem like it's coordinated, it has purpose and design, but it arose from nothing, that it organized itself. They need that myth to promote their worldview, their religion. Of the Enlightenment. Pregnancy. This was another thing. They want population control. They want you to believe that humanity is just an animal like everything else. And so they attack the science of pregnancy. We're going to get into that in a minute. How they proved evolution through pregnancy, because you couldn't really see it. So they just had to tell you. You just had to take it on faith that that evolution happened through the embryonic process. I'll get into that in a minute. That's later. But once they proved that, then they promoted their worldview of abortion. And abortion is huge to them. When they first took over Russia, Lenin and the New World Order, they took down Russia during the Communist Revolution. One of the first things they instituted was abortion on demand, to kill babies. In every country that they take over, they immediately introduce abortion. And abortion was abominable. Now, all of the Christian faith denounced abortion, but it wasn't just in Christianity. It was basically all the world's, even the pagan faiths, even the really bad ones, thought it would be an abomination to kill your own babies. They used the theory of evolution and science to prove that human babies inside of the belly or the womb aren't actually human beings. Okay, we'll get into that in a minute. They actually believed that. They taught it, that you started off as basically an amoeba, and then you kind of became like a fish, and you had gills, and we'll talk about what those are actually. Now science has proved that was totally false, but it doesn't matter. We still have abortion. We still believe in evolution. That was actually ear canals. And then you had a tail, kind of like a monkey at one point. That's just the tailbone, and you didn't have enough of a butt, I guess, to cover it. So science has disproven that theory. But before you could see the embryo process, you just took it on science. Oh man, we go through all the stages of evolution in the uterus. And so a lot of people of faith thought, well, it's been proven now. So anyway, so they use that to promote abortion. Because you're not actually killing, according to them, you're killing an amoeba or you're killing a fish. Because you're not fully human until the end of the process, basically. And then they extended it later and said you're not really fully human. Even after you're born, you basically have the intellect of a chimp. People have argued that. At Princeton University, there was I think it was a professor, I think it was ethics, actually. And he argued that there'd be actually nothing wrong with aborting a fully term-born baby, because they're basically a chimp. I mean, they have the intellect of a chimp. And then they said that you basically, at puberty, you go into the Neanderthal. So you're not fully human yet either. You're kind of in the Neanderthal stage of humanity. And then after like 21 to 25, that's kind of where we get that number from. your brain is fully developed and you're fully human. This also came during the Enlightenment, the science of sexual perversion with Sigmund Freud. These are all the same people, and they started promoting homosexuality. And they want you to believe it's all science. That they're doing these tests, and then they discovered this gay gene or something, and this is just science. You can't argue it with your faith. This is just a fact. Okay, they've made these discoveries, but actually, they set out to prove homosexuality because they want to promote lust. They want to promote lust in every form and destroy the family. So they set out with that goal, and then they work the science to make it look like they proved it. But homosexuality is an oxymoron. There's no such thing as homosexuality. Sexuality is tied to reproduction. Okay, so a man and a man can't have sex with each other. They can do disgusting things to each other, but they can't actually procreate with each other. So even that term, they invent these terms, which kind of are self-fulfilling, but they're oxymoronic. They don't make any sense. There's no such thing as homosexuality. They promoted psychology with Sigmund Freud. That there's no God, there's no spirituality, everything is in your brain, everything is a social construct. And they've come up with some really crazy theories, guys. One was, and it's always wrong. They always get it wrong. It doesn't matter. They do tons of damage, tons of harm. One was repressed memory theory that they came up with. That's just a good example of a time that they got wrong. And I'll give you that example. It's because they're huge on psychology today. They promote that. Instead of spirituality, it's all psychology. It's all in the head. You need to take pills. We need to change your environment, that sort of stuff. And they do psychoanalysis. So instead of like you getting spiritual advice from your spiritual leaders, you repenting, the process of Christianity, they say, hey, there's something wrong with your head. There's nothing wrong with you. There's something wrong with your head. Go to the shrink and he'll kind of work it out for you. And they came up with this crazy repressed memory theory. And this was with Sigmund Freud. Sigmund Freud started promoting this idea. And this is crazy stuff that children and parents have like sexual tension between them, and a young boy will be attracted to his mother, a young girl will be attracted to her father sexually, literally. Really disgusting. And then they planted that in the mind of all these people, and this was just science, okay? This is just scientists. These are all Freemason scientists, of course, but they act like it's just science. They're just following the science. They're making these discoveries. And then they came up with repressed memory theory, this idea that if something really traumatic happened to you in childhood, you would work, because of evolutionary, you're trying to survive, you would work to repress that memory. An example of this, if you guys have ever seen The Last Samurai, I think with Tom Cruise, and he basically kills a bunch of Indian children because he's a really bad, white European, and then he goes over to help the Japanese modernize their army. And he keeps having these horrible dreams of this killing, and it's like this repressed memory that keeps reoccurring in his subconscious, in these dreams. Well, they started telling people, planting this idea that basically fathers are attracted to their daughter and pedophilia is normal and incestual pedophilia and stuff like that. They started really pushing that in the feminist movement as well, and in the psychological movement or psychology. Then they started psychoanalyzing these people. So they'd have these girls that would come in. There's a book that was written on repressed memory theory of a girl that actually went in, and she was becoming a lesbian, and she became kind of a feminist and stuff like that. And she was struggling with all these things, and they started to try to bring out repressed memory theory. And they started asking her, well, did your father ever, molest you? Did he ever hug you too long? Did he ever kiss you too long? Stuff like that. And they're starting to plant this idea in her head that she has, maybe something happened to her, but she's blocked it out. So then she starts thinking about this and dwelling on it over years. And then she starts having these horrible dreams where these things, she's actually seeing these things and feeling these things. And then she goes to psychologists and they say, well, that's not a dream. That's your subconscious that's suppressed this memory of your father molesting you. So that's a real thing. You need to get this out. And so she starts to think about it and dwell on it and look back and interpret all these things from her childhood. And she comes to believe that she was molested, even though she doesn't remember it, but she thinks it's repressed memory theory. She told her family, she denounced her father. I mean, it's a horrible thing. And there were men who went to jail, fathers who went to jail based on repressed memory theory. Now, it's totally debunked. It doesn't matter. It's totally debunked at this point. But these are the scientists, okay? I just want to show you the track record of these people. They're very deviant, and they make you think that, even when they come up with these crazy ideas, these crazy theories, they make you think that they're just following the science. They just stumbled upon it. But you're going to find out it's not. It's their religion. It's their dogmas. And if you disagree with those dogmas, as you saw like with COVID, they'll shut you down. You're not even allowed to speak. They're not following the science, okay? They promoted eugenics. They were trying to take down the monarchies, and the monarchies were just a few families, and you often married cousins. And I don't want to get into all that now, but they really promoted that. This idea that basically we had these weird kind of freakish people because they had married their cousins and stuff like that. They would use it to promote abortion with eugenics and then promote birth control. So they were big on birth control. They invented birth control. I'm just saying that this is who these scientists are, okay? It's a movement. It's a globalist movement. They want to reduce the population, or they want to break up the family. So they come up with this science to do it, okay? They just manufacture it. Gender theory, we have gender fluidity now. You have orientation. You have transgenderism. There's zero scientific evidence for this stuff. There's zero scientific evidence. They're now saying that if you're a boy and you think you're a girl, because everything's a social construct, you actually are a girl. We know that that's not science, but these are the same people. The same people who invented evolution, invented gender theory, invented repressed memory theory, and treated people and got people put in jail for crimes that only happen in the imagination of the person receiving psychoanalysis. They came up with a theory of evolution and to promote abortion, saying that you go through all the stages of evolution in gestation. That's been debunked. It doesn't matter. The science was necessary. It convinced the people, and they still have abortion. And it's not going to go away. Like, enough people believe that you're not actually a person inside of the womb until you're born. It's stuck. So it doesn't matter that it's totally debunked now. It's stuck. And they use a science, and they trick the church. I'm going to get into that. There's a lot of Christians who believe evolution is just a fact, and they've tried to mash the two together because they believe that it was a fact, that it was totally proven, that you couldn't deny it anymore. It's just science, so you'd have to take your faith and just totally shut your brain off because we've proven evolution. And I'll get into that proof and how it's debunked, but it still exists in the textbooks. There are all these apocalyptic predictions that they make in their religion, this religion of science. They talked about overpopulation. This was a huge deal back in the 80s. They said that, I think it was like in the 80s, they said that by the 90s or something like that. I'd have to look it up again. I wrote about it in my book a little bit. But they talked about how the world was going to lose like half of its population, like 2 billion people were going to starve to death because of overpopulation. We couldn't feed people and stuff like that. And they really pushed the birth control at that time. And you had like China reducing their population. You could only have one child. And now we have underpopulation problems. So that was debunked. Global warming. It's very hard to argue because you can't see it. You really have to take it on faith. And you think, well, these are just, and they'll present it this way. We're just scientists. We're just following the data. We've done these charts. Absolutely not. Like they want a one world government. They want to be able to control the economy of the world. And they need some justification of why you have no right to your property. Why they have to control even the air that you breathe. And how you live your life, because the whole world is in danger of this apocalypse. So they needed something apocalyptic. So they invented the science. They needed it. They needed a reason that they could control you and control the world economy and form a one world government. We have to have a one world government after all, because we can't have this country producing too much carbon or something like that because it could kill us all. So they use that as this justification to build their movement. But they start with the movement. They have their goal in mind. We need global domination. So what can we come up with? They tried different things like overpopulation, global warming. When they wanted to take down countries in South America and get control of that area in South America, they talked all about the rainforest, and we need to intervene because the rainforest is being destroyed and it's going to destroy the world. They used to talk about topsoil. They come up with these things, and then recently you saw with COVID what they did, and it gives them great control over the people, and they implement these things. And then if COVID is ever debunked, if it ever goes away, it doesn't matter because all the controls that they put in place stay in place. And this is, I'm tying it back to evolution, guys. And the reason I'm going this route is it's almost not worth debating. Evolution is absurd as transgenderism or abortion. The idea that you're not human until you take your first breath of air, it's absurd. Or that you're a girl if you think you're a girl, but you're a boy, but you think you're a girl, so you are. See, these are absurdities. Repressed memory theory, it's quite the opposite. It's usually if you have something traumatic that happens to you, it can envelop your life. It's the only thing you can think about. There's no such thing as repressed memory theory. Somebody just thought that up and promoted it. So I want to show you is that they have a track record of manufacturing the science to promote their worldview, their agenda. I'd actually say that just the 20th century was all about breaking up the family. It was about abortion. It was about birth control. It was about free love. It was about no-fault divorce. And repressed memory theory and Freud, that pervert Freud, was huge in breaking up the family. Imagine how uncomfortable it is if you're a daughter and you go to school and you learn that your father has secret, fantasies, sexual desires about you. It's disgusting. It makes you uncomfortable. And then you start to second guess, oh, he hugged me. Oh, I sat with him. Or I see what I mean? It creates this, it makes family seem dirty and ugly. And that was the purpose, is to break it up. And they've done a magnificent job breaking it up. They're on to the next wave. They've already destroyed the family, basically, throughout the world. They did it. Evolution, they're on to bigger, better things. Evolution's established fact, basically, in their minds. Most of the people, they've been educating our children, even in the church, for years and years and years, so they've moved on. And what I wanted to say about like Ken Ham is I was going to title this, What Ken Ham Hasn't Told You. Ken Ham is great. He's absolutely tackled evolution from every angle. He's super good. I like Ken Ham. The problem is Christians need to link this together, this fake science, and understand that these people aren't being earnest. They don't have good intentions. This is not really a debate. It's not like you can win this debate by proving evolution wrong. They're going to cling to it. They need that worldview to promote their agenda in the world. And if I was Ken Ham, I'd be talking about all this other fake science, psychology, the push for psychology. Look at they act like it's just the scientific management of children, for example, educational psychology. Look what they've done in the schools. This isn't working. It's a total fraud. They're totally destroying these children. Okay, and they act like they know best because they've got their degree in psychology and all that stuff. Just look at the product. They've totally destroyed these children in the school system. It's fake. You need to link these together. This is a religion, an anti-Christian religion. It's Globalism. It's really Satanism. It's this pursuit of knowledge to become God. Like that's the end goal, is they want to become God. And we'll get to that in just a minute. Like literally a God. But we have I've talked about this before. We have all these kind of hang-ups. We have limited resources and we die and we grow old. And we have a physical reality that we live in, so we need to become transhuman. We need to become almost like a machine that we can live forever and do maintenance to ourselves. Like that's the end goal. This is their religion. This is what they're promoting. And they also realize that they believe that everything is a social construct. So if they can convince you that evolution is true, evolution is true. If they can convince you that you're a boy but you think you're a girl, you're really a girl, it's a social construct, so it's true. And eventually, when they create their metaverse, it will be true. You will be able to live your life as a real girl, as a fake girl, but a real girl in the metaverse, if that makes sense, okay? They have performed signs and wonders. So it's really hard. I mean, it is impressive, these men of science, what they've accomplished. It reminds me of Revelation, when it talks about, the beast performing these signs and wonders, and the people thinking, like, who can even make war on this? Like, surely this is like God. They've developed the nuclear bomb. They can blow up cities. That's worse than any dragon. It's almost like godlike power when we think of like Sodom and Gomorrah and God destroying it. Like they have that ability to rain down fire and just annihilate, right? Robots. They're creating human-like robots, almost like God. It's getting more and more and more real. So where you won't even be able to know the difference between a robot and a human being soon. You can imagine a few hundred years or a few thousand years down the road where this is going to go. Birth control. They're taking over the reproductive process. They can stop you from having birth. They're getting to the point they could probably grow a baby in a test tube. It's miraculous. They were transplanting a pig's heart into a human being. The guy died, but they're getting there. I mean, they're going to be able to grow probably hearts in a petri dish someday. So it actually is incredible what they've done. The drugs that they've come up with. Medical technology is almost like magic nowadays. When you used to have the crystal ball and you could see things, like we have satellites and we can see things in real time all the way across the world. We can talk to people. So it is almost miraculous. It is amazing. So they have performed signs and wonders. But remember, it's a religion. And I don't know that they've made things better in our world. I'll talk about that at the end. You can understand why people are impressed with the scientific movement. And they think, look at all they've solved already. Surely, like this will lead to our salvation. And we'll be able to solve all of the problems, the things that ail man from the curse in the Garden of Eden. Like we will restore eternal life. We'll restore our human dignity. We'll have control over our sex, which was also tied to the fall in the Garden of Eden. Okay, now I actually want to get into some of the arguments in the history of evolution. So I just want you to see first like the background of this, okay? These movements are all tied together. This is all science that's tied together. And a lot of it's just fake science. And the movement says we want to promote lust in the world and break up the family. So let's go do science and then we'll prove it to these Christians. How can they argue with it? They have their Bible, Revelation, but we've proven that there's a gay gene. There isn't one yet, but they make people think that there is. Or we've proven with science, with these studies, that a man is a woman if he says so. We've proven that the world is billions and billions of years old and the Genesis account is just fantasy. We've proven it with science, okay? And they've done a great job destroying the Christian faith and promoting their new worldview, okay? They've proven, at one point, they proved that a baby in the womb was not a human being. They proved it. And it's been debunked, but it doesn't matter. It sticks around. So I want to talk about really quick the history of evolution. It started with the ancient Greeks. Then it went to mutation theory. Actually, before it went to mutation theory, it was Lamarckism. Lamarckism, it's been a while since I taught this. Lamarckism was this idea that you were shaped by your environment. So if a giraffe needed to reach up in the tree to eat, he would keep stretching his neck, and over time, he would just grow a longer neck. Now, once we learned about DNA, we realized that's not really the way it goes. If the giraffe can't reach the leaves in the tree, it just dies or it eats something on the ground, right? So that was kind of debunked and disproven. Then you had mutation theory. They thought, okay, well, if the world is really old, you basically have these animals and they'll mutate. Kind of like X-Men, okay? That's actually, that whole comic strip is like promoting like evolution to young children. This idea that there's these mutations and you have this mutation. And in X-Men, it's really cool. It's not like this tiny mutation. Like somehow you mutate like a whole wing or the ability to shoot lasers from your eyes, right? These mutants, okay? But there was mutation theory. And basically it would say that over time you'd have a species and it would mutate some gene. Like a longer nose or bigger nose. It would help it smell better in its environment. And then it would help it live better, survive a little bit better. And then the others would die off because this guy would survive a little bit better than the other guys. And then he would pass his genes on. And eventually those genes would, bigger nose genes or something would be passed on. So that was mutation theory. That didn't quite work. So they combined that with Darwinism. Mutation theory, it just happened. And then survival of the fittest with Darwinism said, okay, when these mutations happened, it would make them survive in the environment. So the older ones that couldn't survive as well, they would die off. And then the newer ones would continue to perpetuate their genes, okay? And this is the one that's kind of more common today. Although it's really funny because it's actually starting to die off. And you got like the most modern evolutionist right now, let's say, is Richard Dawkins. He's a really famous evolutionist. This is his book, Greatest Show on Earth. I read it a long time ago thinking there's got to be something to evolution. Like they've got to have some hard arguments. Like I grew up as a Christian. I've only heard the Christian side for the most part. I want to go to the source and see what are the best arguments for evolution. And I read his book and was not impressed. I was like, wow, they really don't have anything. But it's funny because Richard Dawkins got pinned down. I think it was Ben Stein and asked him. And after being flustered, because we know DNA is like a sequence code. It's like a computer. It's amazing. It's information. And the idea that this just evolved out of a mud puddle and organized itself and coded itself and copied itself and reproduced itself. It's just absurd when you think about it. It's insanity. It's impossible. And so Richard Dawkins even got pinned down and said, well, I don't know, maybe aliens did it. Like maybe aliens planted the DNA here. So it's funny because evolutionists are almost going even to intelligent design. They just won't admit it's God. But maybe intelligent aliens came and did it. And then they have to explain how the aliens evolved and where they came from. So they really just removed the problem to another place. But it's funny that even the evolutionists now are, because there's so much overwhelming evidence that this is intelligently designed, even they're trying to find ways that maybe it was intelligent, but it wasn't God. It wasn't God, especially not the God of the Bible. So that's kind of where evolution has ended right now. It's Darwinism, mutation, survival of the fittest, mixed with maybe aliens kind of helped plant DNA here. But the most important part is that there's no God. That's what you have to believe. They don't really care what you believe as long as you believe that there's no God, especially no God of the Christian faith. So that's the history. I'm not going to go through everything today, but I really want you to hear about recapitulation theory. Recapitulation theory was when they proved evolution and the churches began to sweat. You had the Catholic Church actually come out, I think it was in the 1950s or somewhere around there. The Catholic Church came out and said that evolution is kind of compatible with Catholicism as long as you believe that God set it up. You can believe in both. So that was a huge blow to the creationist movement, I believe. And a lot of people lost faith in the Bible too, like the Genesis account. Like, oh, well, evolution can fit. And then it gives authority to these scientists, these Globalists, Freemason scientists who promote and make this stuff up. Like, wow, look at, they even backed the church into a corner. And now the church is admitting that evolution can be true. And then they're trying to fit it into the Bible because you know it's fact. And this is where it came, like it went beyond theory and it became a fact that evolution was true in capitulation theory. It doesn't matter that it was quickly debunked because they still teach it in textbooks today. In fact, when I was going through Special Forces training, one of the schools in the pipeline is Chinese. I had to learn the Chinese language for 6 months. And we had this guy in there, he was an officer, and he'd come from West Point. And somehow we started talking about evolution and debating evolution. And he brought that up. He's like, well, you know that you go through the evolutionary process when you're in the womb. I was like, wait, what are you talking about? And he's like, yeah, you go through the evolutionary process when you are in the womb. You start off as an amoeba, and then you become a fish, and you have gills, and then you have a tailbone, or a tail, and then you lose your tail, and you go through the whole process of evolution. So he's like, that proves evolution. Like, it happens. Like, it's still in your genes, and you go through that process. We just don't see it because it's in the womb. Okay, and they could get away with this because this theory was invented in the 1800s, before we were able to see very closely like what the embryo looks like. And so people took it on faith from these scientists. His name was Hegel, who invented the science. He was a Darwinist, and I would say he's a Freemason. I assume he's a Freemason. I don't know for sure, but it sounds like a Freemason. He's tied up in this group. And that would kind of prove evolution. I mean, if you actually went through the evolutionary process in the womb, I think that's actually a pretty good proof. And he drew out these diagrams, and he showed it. And you look at the diagrams like, wow, look at like all these different mammals and stuff like that, like a pig and a human and all these different species. They all go through the same process, from amoeba to fish, and they kind of progress. And they called that recapitulation. So basically you went through the evolutionary process again. And then you're born, you become like a chimp mentality, and then you grow into Neanderthal, and then you grow into fully human around 20 something. Now, I knew that this had been proven false, so I went and looked up stuff. I knew he wouldn't accept anything from a creationist, so I actually found a biologist at Harvard University. So she's pretty smart. And she was like, dude, this is crazy. They're still teaching this in the textbooks, recapitulation theory. It's embarrassing. Hegel was proven wrong. It's making evolutionists look stupid, right? And she was lamenting that. Now, she's still totally an evolutionist. She believes in it. But she said it was really embarrassing that they were still teaching Hegel's recapitulation theory. So I brought that into him, and he was still confused. He's like, well, I don't know. I mean, and they were just teaching this. This was only 10 years ago, maybe. And they were still teaching this at West Point, even though this comes from the 1800s. And within, I think it was like 10 years, this was totally debunked. He totally just made up the drawings. He just drew it. And you think, why would a scientist just make this stuff up? Because they're not a scientist. This is their religion. They fit the science to fit their religion and their world agenda. Okay? And they needed this because they needed abortion. Abortion is like their communion. Abortion is their sacrifice. Okay? It's very important to them. Everywhere they go, they promote abortion, this new world religion, and they needed to convince the people that once you're in the belly, the womb, and you can't see it, so you have to take it on faith, you're not really a human being. So they needed that. And they used that. And a lot of people said, well, if it's just an amoeba or if it's just a fish at that point, there's nothing wrong with aborting it, killing it. And then after the science died, the abortion continues. Okay? So recapitulation theory was super, super powerful because it did back the church into a corner. The church said, well, this is proven. So then they went to Genesis and said, well, how could we fit this into the Bible? Because we also know the Bible's real. And so they tried to say, well, maybe it wasn't literally a day. Maybe it was like millions or billions of years, like periods of time. And maybe man evolved and became Adam. And there's a whole bunch of problems with that, and I can go to that some other time, but I want you to understand that the proof, the fact, it was just a scientific fact that evolution happened in the womb, backed the church into a corner. And then the fact wasn't true. They should have just relied on their scriptures. Okay, the early church fathers all taught in a young earth, and a pretty literal interpretation of Genesis. But we were backed into the corner by these scientists, even though they manufactured it. It was totally lies. And they promoted this stuff to promote their world agenda. So I think that was Pius VII that did that for the Catholic Church, said that basically evolution and creation, you can hold both worldviews. I think you can. I don't think it makes you not a Christian to believe in evolution, but I think it makes you a Christian in error. I think it's foolish. It's embarrassing. It's like a Christian believing in transgenderism. Okay, it's absurd. Why would you believe that? Now, one of the arguments that they make would be about the age of the earth. And the scientists, they use, again, they want to prove evolution, so they use certain yardsticks. And like one of them would be the stars, the distance of the stars and the fact that light has reached here. It takes light a certain amount of time to travel across the galaxies. And they measured that out, and they said, look, based on just this distance that light has traveled, if there's a big bang and it started here together, it's actually very confusing, because if there's a big bang, maybe the light was here and exploded out, And so it was always with us, right? It could be the same thing if God created the world. Like he could have just put the light there and it was always there. But they said, look, if the star's over here and it takes this long for light to travel, the earth must be this old. I don't want to debunk a lot of that stuff, and I can't prove it because I wasn't there either way. There is no proof for it, but I just want to say that they use certain yardsticks because there's other yardsticks we could introduce that would actually point to a young earth. For example, they'll use radiometric dating, which is very unreliable, and there's a lot of open interpretation to it, and it's often based off the evolutionary theory anyway, but they ignore other forms of dating material. Like there was a guy, I think recently at a university, he was a biologist, and he found soft tissue in dinosaur bones. Soft tissue can't exist if dinosaurs are millions of years old. So what did the university do? Were they excited? Did they rethink their theory of evolution? No, they fired the guy. That's how that science works. But I would say that if you ever get pinned down on that, realize that there's other measuring sticks, yardsticks, to measure the age of the universe, and the evolutionists pick the ones that seem to fit their bill. You also need to understand the difference between microevolution and macroevolution. This is, again, a word game, like trans women. Well, there's no such thing. They're just men and women. But they invent these words like homosexuality. There's no such thing. Men and men can't have sexual relations with each other. They can't be homosexual. They can do gross acts, lustful, disgusting, degenerate acts with each other, but they can't actually reproduce. They can't actually have sex. They can't mate with each other. But they create that word, and it makes it appear that it's a real thing. Like love is love. Well, obviously love is love, but lust is not love. So macro and microevolution, even though they both have evolution in the term, they're totally different things. Microevolution, which has been proven, is me essentially getting calluses on the bottom of my feet. I grow thicker calluses. If I'm doing jiu-jitsu or walking barefoot, I'm adapting to my environment. But I'm not changing species. And the ability to adapt to my environment is already in my DNA without any sort of mutation. So they'll take that and say, see, your body can adapt to its environment. And then they leap your body to say that maybe you could even become a new species over time. The problem is if I stop walking barefoot, my calluses will go away. And if there's an extreme environment, I can't adapt quickly enough if it's not already pre-programmed in me, and I'll just pass away. And I can't pass my callous feet onto my children because my DNA hasn't actually changed. It was always there, see? So be careful with that, because they'll give you examples of microevolution, small changes within a species, and then they want to make the huge leap. That from me being able to get more calluses on the bottom of my feet, that I could become, well, I wouldn't become anything. I guess I'm the highest food chain. But let's say, like holding my breath. Maybe I swim a lot, so I can increase the time that I can hold my breath underwater, and my body can continue to function with less and less oxygen. It doesn't mean I become a fish, or could ever become a fish. And if I have children, I don't pass that on to my children. Like they're not able to hold their breath for 2 minutes underwater just because their dad can. They'll have to build it up. And they can build it up because it's in their genetic makeup, but gills is not in their genetic makeup. So there's a huge difference between macroevolution and microevolution. They really shouldn't even call it evolution. It should just be, I don't know, some other word for, it's not even adaptation. It's your adaptability, your genetic human adaptability. Okay, that's totally different than changing species. Another thing I want to talk about is the term dinosaurs. People often say, well, doesn't dinosaurs prove it? Because the dinosaurs are extinct. They are no more. And so they've existed millions of years ago, and we got only their bones, their fossil record. And again, that's another word game, because the term dinosaur was just invented, and it was tied into the evolutionary process or the evolutionary timeline. But actually, it just means terrible lizard, or huge serpent, or sea creature. That's all dinosaur means. But then dinosaur was tied to the evolutionary theory. So it's like, well, do you believe in dinosaur? Well, yes, I do, but I don't see them as any different than a huge crocodile. Okay, those are reptiles, and they'll even say that those are kind of holdovers from the dinosaur period. The only difference is these are dinosaurs. These dinosaurs are reptiles that have gone extinct. They're totally extinct, and the only way that we can find them is there's remnants of their bones, just like every other animal. There's remnants of their bones in the fossil record. But that's all that a dinosaur is. There's biblical accounts. There's historical accounts of dinosaurs. They called them dragons, okay? A dragon, is like a huge serpent. Or dinosaur just means terrible lizard. So think of a huge serpent. That's what a dragon is. You have all sorts of historical records of dragons. There's cave paintings of dragons. There's a gate, the big Babylonian gate. They have like a lion and they have a dragon, some sort of dragon. The Chinese have a dragon right in their calendar. And you have like all these, you like I guess a dog and a rat and then like a dragon. So they saw it as a real creature, a real animal, some sort of terrible or big lizard. And we know that they existed because they're in the fossil record as dinosaurs. The reason we think that they didn't coexist with man is only because of the theory of evolution. If alligators were extinct, they would be considered dinosaurs. We'd think that they lived millions of years ago, even though maybe they go extinct in our lifetime. And we saw it. But if they hadn't, if they'd gone extinct, a few thousand years ago, we would imagine that it was just myth and that they were millions and millions of years in dinosaurs. And they've actually had dinosaurs that became extinct and then they found them. Like there's this dino fish. So they thought it was extinct. They thought it, was millions and millions of years ago, and then they actually found a living one. So they just reclassified it. So it's kind of like begging the term. So yes, I believe in dinosaurs or terrible lizards. I think that, but I don't believe in it as being millions of years old. They believe that the religion of science is infallible. The infallibility of their science and their prophets, these false prophets. It's infallible. It's just a fact. That's all. They get it wrong all the time. Like Fauci with COVID, they were wrong all the time. And they kept saying, you're just anti-science, follow the science. And then they kept being wrong. And then every time that they're wrong, they just say, well, that's part of the scientific process. We're figuring this out, but we're right now. Okay? So that's kind of their way out. No matter how often they're proved wrong with evolution, they say, well, science is always evolving and stuff. We're always learning more. But basically what they're saying is today's truth is greater. It's even more true than yesterday's truth, which was kind of wrong because we've tested this stuff out and now we know it's a fact. It's true. Okay, it's the same thing with evolution. They've been proven wrong over and over and over and over and over. It hasn't. They will never give it up. Transgenderism, there's like no evidence for this. There's no evidence for it at all. It's just totally a social construct. How could you change your mind, your gender, by just thinking that you're a different gender? It's absurd, but it doesn't matter. They're going to keep building the case, looking for all these different angles that they come up with scientifically to build that case because they believe in it. They'll never give up that faith. The science will never convince them otherwise. It's the same with evolution. No matter how much creation science we do and how often we disprove their models, they're just going to keep coming back and saying, well, the science is growing. We were wrong last time, but we're right this time, It's an infallible. It's just like a Bible. We consider it infallible. They consider their science infallible. I want you to remember, like I've said many times, Satan's promise in the garden. He said, with the knowledge of good and evil, but it was with this knowledge, is what the scientists believe, you'll become like God, and God's afraid of that. Many of these people believe that Satan is good, even if he's not real. They believe he represents the good in the world, and that he's liberating mankind from God. And that these evil things like death and lust and sin and gluttony, they believe that those things are only wrong in the sense that they used to hurt people. They used to hurt us, make us less than. But if they can eliminate the repercussions, then there's actually nothing wrong with lust or gluttony. For example, if you want to gorge yourself and eat all this food, if they can come up with some pill that keeps you healthy, even as you just eat all this food, okay, then there's nothing wrong with gluttony. Or with lust, they said, the reason that lust is wrong is because people have babies. And if you have a baby with 10 different people, it can get confusing and you don't know who the dad is and stuff like that. So we have DNA tests now for that. Or people can have sex without having babies because of birth control. So they're trying to eliminate the adverse consequences of the lust so that you can lust without the repercussions. Sexually transmitted diseases, that's another reason you should only be with one woman or one man, right, for your whole life because of sexually transmitted diseases. Well, they're trying to eliminate that. Again, with condoms, with treatments and stuff like that. They want to be able to eliminate those things so you can indulge yourself in every sort of sin and it won't hurt you and it won't hurt other people. So do whatever you will, just don't hurt other people. They're trying to create that world for themselves. They're trying to eliminate that curse of death so that we can live our life any way that we want. We never have to fear of dying and going before a God, a judge, or worrying about the afterlife because we can live forever. They'll even try to find some way to reincarnate ourselves so that if we die, they could have like a copy of our DNA or something and organic material and reinvent it. I mean, this is their religion. They really believe in this stuff. This is ancient too. It goes all the way back to the Egyptians. Remember they used to store your organs and stuff separate? They've been working on this for a long time and they make the science fit. The womanhood. Women were cursed by God in the garden. So were men. Men had a curse that they had to work super hard. This new world order religion based on science, with science, hopes to eliminate work. That's why they want universal income. They want us to be able to be lazy. That we don't have to work or improve our world at all. We can do whatever we want. We can just eat, drink, and be merry. And we'll have a system that can distribute our needs, our resources, to eliminate the curse God gave us, that we'd have to survive by the sweat of our brow. So they're trying for that. With women, women were put under man's authority or their husband's authority during the curse. They're literally Satanism. They literally want to reverse everything that God has done in the world, okay? It's very important to them. So at first they have pain medication for when you give birth, and we appreciate that. Like, I don't know if there's anything wrong with that. But the goal, and now they have surrogacy. So if you're wealthy enough, you don't have to have any pain in birth. You can put your egg in another woman, she'll carry it for you, and eventually the goal is a petri dish, okay? Because this is their religion. They want to eliminate the curse from God. They hate God. They're going to undo all that he's done. Remember, God cursed us not to hurt us, but to help redeem us. Let us experience a taste of hell in this world, a taste of death, so that we would reject it. These people say, we'll become God. We'll be our own salvation. And they're also, another goal is feminism. They want to eliminate the hierarchy between the sexes, between husband and wife, even marriage and family, right? But they want to eliminate that. It's really a goal of theirs. And they're trying to do this through science and transgenderism and all this stuff to blur the sexes. And you can give women steroids now to make them almost as strong as a man. And maybe someday it'll be law, like mandated equality. So men will have to take like estrogen pills and women will take steroids. And maybe like there will be some sort of equality. I mean, that is their goal, is to eliminate that social hierarchy that God put in place between the sexes. So when you start to realize like what this religion is and where the science is driving it, like it makes perfect sense. It's Satanism. And they believe that they're going to redeem the world by destroying God and creating even like a metaverse or our own universe. And that's another thing that's really interesting. So one of the problems with this world is we almost have to die. There's only so much room on this planet. There's only so much resources on this planet. Like we get sick and stuff. So again, like almost like the Matrix, like these people hope to create a world that you can live in, like a little box that like feeds you and stuff, just like the Matrix. But you are actually a god of a universe, of many universes. You can speak things into existence in your metaverse, and you won't know it's not real. You will truly be like a god. You could have 1,000,000 wives. You could commit any genocide in your metaverse. This is really important to them. Remember, they want you to be able to do whatever you want like a god, but you don't want to hurt other people, because that wouldn't be good, right? So they already have video games like that. I saw a video game, I couldn't believe it the other day, where it was like you were a serial killer, and it was really disgusting, like demonic. You had to click the buttons to undo her shirt. You opened up her shirt, and then you took a pair of scissors and started cutting her belly open and stuff. Really disgusting, right? But they would say, hey, there's really nothing wrong with being even a genocidal maniac, like having that lust to murder and torture other human beings. It's only wrong because you actually hurt other human beings. But if it's just in a video game, and in this metaverse, you could torture things all day long. And you'd think it was real, and you'd get the pleasure of that evil pleasure, but you wouldn't really be hurting people. So like that's the goal that they want. They want you to be as evil and as wicked as you desire. You will be the god. You'll be in charge of your own destiny. Okay, and you see this a lot in the movies that they create too. It's all one movement. And all these Disney movies, they talk about being rebellious and creating your own world and following your own dreams, right? It goes all the way back to the Garden of Eden, Satanism. You are going to create your own universe. You're going to be God in their mind. As Christians, I don't think we'll be mocked. I think God can invade the metaverse and send us to hell anyway. But they certainly are performing signs and wonders. This New World Order, satanic, scientific religion. And they're going to lead a lot of people astray. Because it is, I mean, imagine if they could bring something to life through science or something. I don't know, okay? Clone people, stuff like that. Give people eternal life so that people didn't die. I mean, it really will be these powerful signs and wonders. And you'll have to choose between the satanic New World Order, become your own God religion, or I'm a human being created in God's image. I want to worship him and be his servant in relationship with him. You'll have to choose at some point. And ask yourself, has science made the world better? Because that's the promise, that they're going to bring paradise. They're going to bring perfection to the world through science and through reason. Just ask yourself, do we fight less wars today? Is there less carnage? Is there less heartache in the world? As we've overthrown God's revelation and instituted psychology and manly institutions, like as we've broken up the families, are people getting happier? Are they more free? Do they feel more fulfilled? Or are they creating hell on earth? I think they're creating hell on earth. Look at what the science has done. It's done some good things. But we're actually creating weapons of war now that can eliminate humanity, like literally destroy the entire world. And there's no stop to it. If we have atomic bombs now, just think of what the future will be. Think of what they could do. Maybe someday they could literally, one person could blow up the whole universe and just it'd be over. Like we are creating hell on earth, this scientific movement. So, as far as more research goes on evolution creation, I recommend Ken Ham. I really recommend Kent Hovind. Have your kids watch the debates. It's really funny, Kent Hovind, because he talks about the New World Order. This guy, I didn't know anything about him as a kid, except I watched his videos, and he did these debates, creation versus evolution debates. He is a champion. He's a great orator. And then all of a sudden he got locked up. I think he went to prison for a long time. Like some people, it was some sort of tax fraud. He was pretty open about it. He's like, I'm not giving them my money. And he was like a charity. So he paid people who worked for him in cash. If he was a celebrity, a liberal celebrity, he probably would have gotten community service. But I think he got like 10 years or something. His wife went to jail too. It's horrible. But now he rants and raves about the New World Order. And at the time I was like, what is he talking New World Order? Like, this guy's crazy now. I go back and I listen to him now and I get what he's saying. I know that these people went after him. They don't care about science. They only like science when it supports their worldview. But they don't actually care about science. And that's why Christians are getting kicked out of universities. That's why my dad, he lost his medical license. He used science. He's like, hey, there's no proof that COVID can be stopped by these masks. It's ridiculous. You know, we use like hazmat suits or something for real viruses, right? Certainly, time has proved that. Everybody pretty much got COVID, whether you wore a mask or not, right? It doesn't even seem to have flattened the curve or done anything. But they wanted to shut you down, so they had their scientists come out and say that this is fact, and anybody who disagrees with that, even if they're doctors or scientists, they have other evidence that they're promoting misinformation, and they just shut you down. And that's the way it works. That's the way it works with transgenderism. If you disagree with that now, you're anti-science. They want to be able to dictate truth and call it science. So I'd continue to study evolution, but remember, all I really wanted to say today is I feel like Ken Ham and some of those guys, Kent Hovind's pretty good, but I feel like Ken Ham, sometimes he treats evolution as a misunderstanding, and if he can just win the debate, and then he treats it individually, I want him to see the whole picture. Like, this is a cabal. It's not a scientific, it's not a fair debate. Even if you prove Bill Nye the Science Guy wrong in a debate, it's not going to change his mind. Like, this is their religion, their worldview, and it's all connected. All this insane science stuff. And when somebody tells me that they're a Christian but they believe in evolution, it's just like if somebody said, I'm a Christian and I believe in transgenderism, you're a man, and you think you're a woman, you're a woman. It's just as absurd. Or the world isn't because it's a good argument or it's proven science or anything like that. It's because they got into the schools and they own the schools. And they're teaching all these kids at a very young age, same with transgenderism. All these kids are believing this. Kids believe in Santa Claus. They trust the adults in their lives to tell them the truth. And how can they refute it? If their teacher tells them that this is what happened, evolution, they believe it and they continue to believe it. It perpetuates itself. So I think that the way to beat this isn't necessarily by becoming better at apologetics and stuff like that. It's good, to have a defense, but homeschool your kids. I think that's the most important thing. And make sure that these people know that the same people who are promoting the insanity of transgenderism and homosexuality and abortion are the same people who came up with the theory of evolution. It's been totally disproven, totally debunked. It was a total fraud. Okay? They just made it up. And you have to think, why did they make it up? Why would they make it up if they're just following the science? Why would he lie and make this sketch? Because it's not science. He needs you to believe in that worldview to promote his agenda. Okay? I hope that makes sense. I'm rambling now. All right, guys. That's all I want to say on evolution. If you want to know more about it, go to Ken Ham. Go to Kent Hovind. Those are great, great apologists. They can teach you so much more of the details and to debunk everything. I just wanted you to know that there's no earnestness in this movement. It's not actually science. They write the scripts to this stuff and they promote it. They promote it through movies. They promote it through the school system. They don't want to debate. If you're a creationist in a university as a professor, they kick you out. They don't want to hear the other side. There's no debate. This is their dogma, their worldview. It's all tied together. All right, guys, I will talk to you